All items listed are for discussion only. There is only one item, and that is the budget. No action can or will be taken as a result of this work session. All members of council are in attendance, and we'll start with Mr. Fischbach, and then I do have one speaker right now who wishes to speak, and maybe more later. I'm going to have two, please. Okay, Mr. Fischbach.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I have a presentation this evening which basically summarizes where we're at and then tells you what the final recommendation is. This is the agenda for tonight. It's a summary of the 09-10 revenues. Nothing new there. Policy direction that the council has provided on the expenditures to date. Follow-up from the May 11th work session, both the COPS hiring grant, the staffing of the fire service companies comparisons, employee compensation and benefits comparisons, tax rates and fee comparisons. Then we'll review policy direction that you have provided, that the council has provided on revenues, and then recommended use of reserves, and the city manager's recommendation and the council direction. This you have seen many times. I just will review it quickly for the benefit of the public. This is the recommendations that were submitted to you on May 4th, May 11th, and again tonight, May 18th. This is a budget of $56 million, basically rounded off. Total sources for the general fund, $60,251,000. Total budgeted expenditures are $69,553,000. Adding in transfers, $73,121,000. And the projected shortfall is $13.934 million. To date, reducing expenditures, this is the 3 R's, revenues, reductions, and reserves. Reducing expenditures, we have come up with $6.8 million to be reduced next year, including 29.5 positions in the general fund, which have been either frozen or laid off. This represents $2.1 million, and it's already been completed. But we've actually reduced our budgets much more. During this 2-year period, we have cut or frozen 28.5 positions and other costs and rolled those forward each year. This has resulted in a total of $6.6 million in budget cuts being carried forward for a total value of $13.4 million worth of cuts in 09 and 10. We've cut our staffing in excess of 11%, including 3 sworn fire positions, 1 EMS coordinator and 2 firefighters, and 1 sworn police officer. They've been frozen for a year now. We have also cut 2 director positions, both the community services. When Patty Evans left, we have dispersed that department out into the police department, the finance department, and other places. And the water resources director, we consolidated public works and water resources and did not replace the public works position. So Sean Bradford is now the director of water resources and public works. And we did not add a 3rd deputy manager as Matrix had recommended. As far as policy direction that we've received on expenditures to date, 1% for art. We have been able to keep $192,000 in there for art. That is sufficient to keep the art specialist on staff and fund approximately $125,000 of projects. Community not-for-profit funding, $181,000, is maintained at the same level. We have put in focus back in $100,000, and that's a change from last week. Non-budgeted increases in spending, 1% for the environment. We are actually in excess of 20% next year for all the different projects that we're pursuing. The joint projects with neighboring jurisdictions, Maricopa was an example I used. We're still working with Avondale, Litchfield Park, and others on other combined services possible. Maintenance of county ball fields is too costly to undertake at this time. Allowable service modifications on unguarded skate parks, bulk trash changes are both yeses. Loma Linda Pool is staying open. We have not closed it. And charging for events may be based on the study that's due any day now. Public safety staffing, we have received, we think, clear direction not to cut any further, and I'll address that. We have received, well, the council's actually approved 2 weeks ago, the grants for cops to hire the street crimes unit, and we are still proceeding with that. We have checked again as recently as today about the cops grant, and it is technically does not have to be approved until September 30th. We anticipate that it will be approved during the summer, but we don't know for sure. And then staying with four-man fire crews. This is an indication of the police workload right now. The light blue are the columns for 09, and last month, these are reports from ComStat. Last month, they had 8,800 calls for service, just incredible. And the month before that was 6,880, which is almost one of the highest months. And then 2 months before that was 6,850, or excuse me, 6,880. So those are tremendous workloads that are being placed upon the police department. The average, as you look at that, is roughly 5,000 calls for service per month. This is a response time for the police department. The Citizens Committee, when they looked at this, the Public Safety Citizens Committee, they, in 1, 2, 3, and 4, the priorities, they placed 7 minutes for priority 1, 15 minutes for priority 2, 19 minutes, 29 minutes for priority 3, and 36 minutes for priority 4. You know, it's incredible what the police department has been able to accomplish over the past several months, in a large part because of ComStat and other efforts. We are down to, there is no one on a priority 1 call that takes more than 5 minutes, and that's beat 5. The average is 4.606 minutes. I mean, that's incredible, what they have been able to achieve. And that's against a goal of 7 minutes. And then the 15 minutes, we have an average of 5.5 minutes. And that's incredible. And in the map are shown the beats and where they are. The uniform crime reporting, 2008 was the lowest that we've had in 10 years. And this year, all the categories are trending lower than 2008. So we're very pleased with those results to date. And these are basically the average is 182 per month in these various categories. As far as the COPS hiring grant, the City Council has approved the proposal to use the COPS hiring grant for the addition of an additional street crimes unit, 6 entry-level officers plus a sergeant to fund a street crimes unit, 1 entry-level officer to assist with the prisoner transport and security at the municipal court, 1 entry-level officer to work as a motor officer in the traffic unit to investigate traffic collisions and enforce traffic laws, 1 entry-level officer to work on a patrol squad where a position is currently frozen. These positions were identified because they provide the city with the most flexibility to address growing areas of criminal activity without massive amounts of new hires. If funded, this money could be used to pay existing officers. This is an option that the City Council has. Those officers would have to be RIF'd, reduction in force, or scheduled for RIF. They'd have to be identified and announced that these people were going to be RIF'd. The award averages $776,000 a year, and it's for 3 years or a total of $2.3 million. It's 100% funding for entry-level positions. For the sergeant, for example, we will have to pay the extra between an entry-level and a sergeant. Formal notices of RIF would have to be issued to each officer and documented for the grant purpose. We can receive the grant, assuming that we get it, let's say this summer, June, July, whatever. We can then ask for an amendment to the grant, and they tell us that they would almost automatically be awarded. So that is something that is possible. The addition to the street crime unit is a direct result of Goodyear's ComStat program, and it provides the greatest flexibility of the workforce in order to be deployed at any given moment to wherever the priorities are. Matrix recommendation, 3 firefighters. The matrix recommendation report did not speak to the 3 firefighters, except this is a direct quote from the matrix report. It said that specifically talked about future planning efforts. In future planning, the fire department should study and consider the option of assigning 3 firefighters to some apparatus instead of 4. In evaluating this option, all factors presented in this report should be considered, such as fire station locations and response times, hazards in the district, call for service workload, protection measures in existence, such as sprinkler ordinance, etc. The city management submitted a response to the matrix report, which was reviewed and approved by the city council. And these are some quotes out of that. It talks about reduced staffing for the initial distribution of companies serving in Goodyear presents level of service degradation, consequences regarding participation in the automatic aid, and most important, challenges to firefighter safety. Firefighters cannot make entry into a structure fire with only 3 persons on the scene. Despite this concern, the department, this is all from the report, the department supports the consideration of reduced staffing configurations, such as those mentioned in the report. That's the matrix report. EMS response units and other supplemental units will be necessary as infill begins to occur as more intense risk categories are developed, or as call volume factors such as those in more populated communities dictate greater resources. Over the past 2 years, the fire department has proposed to the city council, this is from the report again, the addition of several 2-person EMS response units. We have not been in a position to implement that. With the changes that we are experiencing with the montage and the personnel coming back up north, we are going to be in a position to implement that for a 2-man crew for the paramedics. Furthermore, these units could handle some lower priority EMS calls, etc. We intend to pilot a 2-person EMS response unit in the very near future, and the pilot program will occur as a result of bringing the additional staff up from the Mobile area. In the metropolitan Phoenix area, staffing levels of 4 firefighters are routine and maintained on all firefighting apparatus trucks. Specialized support and EMS apparatus are staffed with up to 2 firefighters and are typically deployed from stations along with fully staffed apparatus. Currently, Goodyear only operates 1 firefighting apparatus from each station, and therefore we need the 4 firefighters on those units in order to be able to knock down structure fires quickly. In the future, consistent with the matrix report and recommendation, we will examine the use of EMS and or rapid response units as secondary units in our response system. This is a tabulation of the cities in the Phoenix area and elsewhere in the state. Goodyear, everyone has 3-man crews, no. Everyone has 4-man crews, yes, in the Phoenix area, West Valley, East Valley. And then 2-man crews, the only 2 are Goodyear, we're implementing that, and then Mesa. They do have, as we heard last week, 2-man crews that are supplement to and in addition to the truck companies that they have, which are all 4-man crews. Elsewhere in the state, there is Tucson, which is also has 2-man crews for paramedics, but Flagstaff, Prescott, and Yuma all operate 3-man crews. So it is a practice, but it is not in the metropolitan area because of the mutual aid agreement that everybody has signed. Employee compensation and benefits history. It's been the city's philosophy to strive to hire the best and brightest and to expect superior performance from our employees in order to provide outstanding service to the citizens of Goodyear. The mayor and the council have made this a priority over the years by committing resources to build and retain as competitive of a compensation and benefit level as possible. In fiscal year 1999 and 2000, it was difficult to attract and retain employees. We had a 12% attrition rate in 1998 and 1999, 10% attrition rate in 1999 and 2000. Many left for higher wages in both the public and the private sectors. In fiscal year 2000-2001 budget, the council approved the city's first compensation classification and benefit study. It was conducted by an outside consulting firm, and the results of that study A, the council approved placing midpoint of ranges at 106% of market average. 2, recommended periodic surveys to see if they are still competitive. 3rd, surveys done annually for the past 8 years. The market position gradually declined to 101% due to financial constraints and competing priorities. After the first class and comp study, the attrition rate went back to 3.7% in fiscal year 02 and 03. Fiscal year 05 and 06, the attrition rate was back up to 13.3% and 8.5% in 06 and 07. The 2007 matrix study recommended another class and comp study by an outside consultant. We had a selection committee made up of 3 council members and some staff members to choose the consulting firm. The state of Arizona's information was removed from the salary portion of the study because of the depressed pay rates and inappropriate matches. Cities approved by the City Council. These cities were approved for comparison benchmarks: Avondale, Buckeye, Chandler, Gilbert, Glendale, Peoria, Surprise, Phoenix, Tempe, and Scottsdale. Those are the 10 cities. Goodyear makes up the 11th city that is in the comparative analysis. Data for the executive level positions was also utilized from the ICMA studies, and those included Colorado Springs, Frisco, Texas, Henderson, Nevada, North Las Vegas, Nevada, Plano, Texas, and South Lake, Texas. The council's desired market position was originally defined as 100 to 105%. Due to the beginning decline of the national and local economic conditions, we requested that the consultant recommendation be at 100% with a 1% market adjustment. This recommendation was accepted by the City Council, and the pay plan was implemented in July of 08, budget with a 1% market adjustment. Merit increases for performance were suspended that year, while 7 out of the 10 benchmarked cities continued to give increases, therefore causing the city to fall further behind. No merit increases or market adjustments are being recommended in 09 and 10, similar to other benchmarked cities. By July 1st of 09, our market position will have declined to 97.4% against benchmarked cities based on our comp and class study. This is a comparison of the benchmarked cities to the League of Cities study that was referenced last week. And yes, if you include Lake Havasu and other cities, we may be the highest. But this takes the 10 benchmark cities, pulls that salary information out of the study, and then compares them. And I must admit that the study is only as good as the information that goes into it. So you're totally dependent on the cities responding. That's why most of the cities larger than us and ourselves do our own studies independently of the league. This is a very important study to the smaller communities, but it is not a good one for communities of our size. But this shows, for example, the city manager is 9th out of 11 cities. And it's actually 10th because Avondale increased their city manager salary to $183,000 in April of 2008, and that never showed up in the study. And then under the personnel director, she is ranked as number 1, 116%. That was because Scottsdale did not have a person in that position at the time, and they hired one after that at $150,000, which is far more than she makes. And so all of these positions, executive secretaries, we do not have a good job description. We don't have executive secretaries. We do have executive assistants, which do things in addition to executive secretaries. So this is the comparison of the benchmarked cities chosen by the council and where we are in comparison to them. This is dealing with the privilege tax. We are recommending that it go to 2.5%, and in green is the recommendation. Restaurants would stay at 4%. We're ranked at number 1 right now. Contracts would be at 3.5%, no change, and then the Goodyear rate would be 2.5%. Importantly, statewide, 28 cities have a general sales tax rate above 2.5%. Now, admittedly, most of them are smaller cities, but there are several in there, such as Litchfield Park, which was reported in error. They are at 2.8%. And then you have Avondale, which is at 2.5%, Tolleson at 2.5%, Litchfield Park at 2.8%. You also have current rates in the East Valley, and most of these are older cities, and those taxes are somewhat lower. Transient lodging tax.
John, they have, can I ask a question? They have bigger populations than we do. Chandler, Gilbert, Mesa,
Yes.
Phoenix, much larger populations.
On the transient lodging tax rate comparisons, we are recommending that that go to 2.5%. The lodging tax would be 2.5%. The total tax would be 5%. That's because we're recommending that it go up 0.5%. It will put us in the second highest taxed community. Glendale is number one with 5.6% total tax. And this shows you what the other cities are at. 4.5% is the average total lodging tax. Property tax comparisons, we also took a look at those. We are not the highest. We're number 3 at 1.60, and that's down from the 2.10 that we were at. And the communities that are lower than us are Phoenix at that are higher than us are Phoenix at 1.82 and Tolleson, which is at 2.29. So we do fall third in relation to those taxes. The average combined rate is $1.32. These next 3 slides I won't really address. They deal with CFDs. I'll just go, if you want me to address them, I can. Go to the last slide in this series, the third one, and it just shows how many CFDs do we have in our city. We have 10 in the city of Goodyear. And do any homes live under more than one CFD in Goodyear? Yes, in Palm Valley. How many other valley cities have CFDs? Buckeye has more than we do. They have 11. Their rates are also higher than ours. They go from 30 cents to $3.30. Then comes Goodyear with 10. We go from 15 cents to $2.79. And then Scottsdale, Peoria, and so forth. Water and sewer rate comparisons to Goodyear, and that, as a matter of fact, tonight is a matter of public hearing before the City Council. Our recommendation that you have already heard in work session, that you will be hearing, is to go to 6450 in 2010, and that would put us at a third rank of other cities. Lipscomb, which is also in there at 2010, we have no idea if this will be approved, but they have filed for this increase. Would put them at $76.85. It's a 117% increase. So we don't know if they would be approved or not. That's what they've applied for. And then the second is Buckeye, $68.79. Let me talk just for a moment about treatment costs and why those figures are that way. We're kind of like a big basin, and all the salt comes down into the bottom of that basin. Unfortunately, Buckeye and Goodyear are at the bottom of that basin. And so that's why Buckeye and Goodyear have higher amounts, because it costs more to desalinate water, and it costs more because we also have arsenic in the water to get rid of that. Cities, you say, well, why not Avondale? They're at the bottom also. Well, they are, but they have SRP water, Salt River Project. And the cities like Peoria and Avondale both have Salt River Project water, and that's why they are significantly cheaper.
John, while you're on that, does Lipscomb have an open docket at the Corporation Commission?
I believe so.
For that rate? Can we get that information sent to the council and
Sure.
maybe even post it on our website in terms of how residents within Lipscomb service territory can make remarks to the Corporation Commission?
We sure can. Thank you.
Yeah, that's just for information, that's a common tactic for private utilities, especially in the water industry in Arizona, is to go in high, so that way they can accept something that's defensively lower. So while shocking, I doubt they'll get even close to that.
Impact fees. To talk about the impact fees, what are impact fees? An impact fee is a fee imposed on new development to pay for the construction or expansion of off-site capital improvements that are needed as a result of the new development. Impact fees may assist in the development of needed parks, roads, sewer, water treatment, utilities, libraries, and other public safety buildings, for example. How do impact fees differ from taxes? Because there is a difference. Impact fees are authorized through the state as a method for financing costs to provide necessary public services to new development and should not be considered a tax. Impact fees are a part of the development approval process. Requiring an impact fee to provide adequate public facilities is similar to meeting site planning and zoning requirements. How do cities use impact fees? Impact fees are implemented to help reduce the economic burden on local governments to deal with population growth within that area.
Could I ask a question on the impact fee? I noted in some correspondence that the state is looking at $210 million. $210 million voluntary impact fees from the cities to help them through their budget. It's voluntary. So what is the carrot they're going to hang over us if we say we do not want to volunteer our impact fees because we feel that's illegal?
What they have offered, now this has not progressed past the House, but what they have offered as a carrot is that cities can use those impact fees for operational purposes. So you can, in effect, launder the money into a general fund usage. That is illegal constitutionally. The League of Cities have already, we had a study done by a constitutional lawyer who has pointed that out to them. We have told the House that. We have told the Senate that. The Senate accepts it basically, and that's why it isn't proceeding. But they also said that, okay, if you voluntarily give us this, you will then have to, I forget how it's written, but it's a double whammy to the city that you would spend the money twice. And then if somebody comes in and asks you, okay, build my paid for impact fee thing, traffic light, and you say, I'm sorry, we can't, we voluntarily took this money and put it to operations, then we end up in lawsuits over spending that money. So
Thank you,
it
John.
won't go anywhere. The impact fees, again, we aren't the highest. Goodyear is at the 6th place in the West Valley and East Valley cities. Chandler is number 1 with $20,553. They use a 1-inch meter. And the rest of the cities use a 3/4-inch meter, and that makes somewhat of a difference. Of the $14,850 that we have for impact fees, $9,297 is charged for water and sewer. I mean, so it's to fund utilities. Generally, units that are up in Lipscomb area, north of I-10, since they don't have to pay us a water impact or water and sewer impact fee, they pay $5,553 for impact fees. The cities that are higher than us, the first is Chandler, the second is Surprise, the third is Gilbert, the fourth is Avondale, the fifth is Peoria Central, and the sixth is Goodyear. What about sales tax affecting the attraction of a mall? We talked with a major mall developer and asked him, how does somebody pick where a mall goes? And they indicated that that's clearly area population, area income. Those are the important things. We asked them, how does Goodyear fit in with that comparison? They said, excellent, no problem. And if you look at our neighbors, Avondale, Litchfield Park, you see why. And this is a table that shows, our recommendation to go to 2.5%, where the other cities are, what it costs to purchase a $100 item in the various cities, and what it costs to purchase a $1,000 item in various cities. And you'll note that Goodyear recommended rate, you're going to spend $250 for a $100 item, and Glendale, which some would consider one of our major competitors, you're going to spend 30 cents more on a $100 purchase. We don't believe, and the mall developer does not believe, that it is a serious matter to concern us. Policy direction provided so far on revenues that we have heard 0.5% sales tax increase, which will raise $3.2 million in 09 and 10. It excludes restaurants and contractors, and it includes transient lodging. We will report every year on how we are doing in relation to the tax, and we will vote, bring back to the council in the even-numbered years, 2012, 2014, 2016, to have you take a look at it and to reconsider that. Continuing on the policy direction we have heard on revenues, we have the use tax built in at 2.5%. That will, this is really a scientific wild guess, that will generate $250,000. Residential rental units we have changed per your recommendation to 2 from 1. We're at 3 right now, so we're bringing it down to 2, and that will generate approximately $75,000. Business license fee we are creating at $75. We had looked at 50, then we looked at 100 after talking with you, but we cannot justify 100, so we settled on 75 because we can justify 75, recognizing that fees you have to have a nexus to what services you're providing. That will raise $158,000. Eliminating the 2-tier tax rate will give us $175,000. And then user fee study, which is coming in any day now, we're indicating that it will give us $50,000. I suspect it'll be more than that, but that we're awaiting the report. Economic development reimbursement will be $55,000. So that total is $763,000. As you'll recall, it was previously $765,000.
John, your original recommendation was for 5%. Now you're coming back with 2.5%. Where is that difference made up monetarily?
It's a 0.5 increase to 2.5%.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
And in summary, this fiscal year 09 and 10 budget, there is a shortfall after the $6.8 million in expenditure cuts, which is $7.1 million. We make that up with the additional revenue of $4 million, which comes from the 0.5% general tax increase and all other sources, roughly $800,000. That means that we will use reserves at the tune of $3.1 million. This shows you the fund balance estimates, with blue being no sales tax increase, magenta being, I like that color, I think it's magenta, 0.25% sales tax increase, and yellow being a 0.5% sales tax increase. You'll see from that that the yellow, that it will not go into a deficit position until 2011. If you approve the yellow, it will produce and this is the line that shows the requirement per the charter, which is 4 months of the previous year's expenditures. That's why it's at $20 million right now, because 4 months of this year's expenditures would be $20 million. With the reduction in budgets, it will be $16.5 million or something like that. We believe that with the conservative budgeting that we have done and with the conservative estimating that we do, that this is a workable program that we will be able to manage our way through, assuming things start coming around. You can see that with the magenta, if you do a 0.25% increase, you immediately go much deeper into the hole that you'll have to dig your way out of and actually end up in a deficit position in 2013 and 2014. If you have 0 sales tax increase, you'll drop down in 2011 to, I don't know if that's $3.5 or $4 million, and then immediately go down into a deficit position of $6 million, and then almost $10 million, and then $12.5 million. What we are recommending as a recovery plan is that the city charter recommends, as I mentioned, 4 months. We will not experience a deficit anticipated until 2010 and 2011. Once the deficit is reached, we plan to take 20% of revenues collected over budgeted revenues to rebuild reserves. The balance will go back to the general fund to pay for employee salaries and things like that. The goal is to rebuild reserves to the charter recommended levels as quickly as possible. This table, there's a lot on this, but it shows you basically what the plan is. The colored, at the middle of the page, the colored is the 20% if you go across this example. And then you go down at an angle, you will see where the 0 comes in the following year, the 0.6 comes in the following year, the 1 million comes in the following year, and so on. And it shows you that what is likely to happen, we will end the 9-10 fiscal year with $17.1 million in reserves, which is sufficient to meet the charter requirements. The following year, if we have to, we will use up to $4.6 million in reserves, and that would bring it down to $12.5 million. Then the following years thereafter, it will start producing a number that we can apply the 20% to, so it would go up 1 million to 2 million to 2.4 million. Summarizing the manager's recommendations, we have reductions of revenues by $6.8 million. That's a reduction in personnel of $2.1 million, which has already been achieved with the layoffs that were done several weeks ago, last month. A reduction in associated personnel costs, $1.2 million. Reduction in development-related contractual services, $2.8 million. Commodities savings, $300,000. Reducing the art program, it was $561,000 by $400,000. That leaves roughly the $192,000 budgeted for the art program for next year. We're recommending the use of reserves at $3.1 million, down from the $4 million. And we're increasing the general sales tax rate by 0.5% and recommending that the City Council revisit that in 3 years and the even number years thereafter. We're recommending approval of the other sources and the fees. That's $800,000, eliminating the two-tier tax rate, $175,000, implementing the use tax of $250,000 that will gain the city, changing the business license fee or adding the business license fee from $0 up to $75. That will generate approximately $158,000. The rental unit tax going from 3 down to 2 will be $75,000. And then the user fee study and the economic development bonds for a combined total of $105,000. The salary cuts and the furloughs, as I've talked about consistently since the start of all of this, are in consideration if the mall does not proceed, and we have to respond quickly to those changing conditions. Where do we go from here? The tentative budget adoption is next 6/4, so 2 weeks from now, June 4th. The final budget adoption and public hearing are June 22nd, and the property tax levy adoption is July 13th. Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to answer any questions that any of you might have.
Okay, thank you, John. John, could you put the last chart up, the second one, 2 before this one, which is your recommendation? Just have that posted. Okay, I have 2 cards, or I have a card, and I know there's another one over there, to speak on relative to the budget. Brenda Bernardi, and we'd ask you to limit your comments to 3 minutes, if you would.
Mayor, council members, thank you again for the work that you do on our behalf. I wanted to urge you to support and accept staff's proposal for the arts funding in this budget, although it is about 66% less than the full 1% ordinance. Your support demonstrates Goodyear's commitment to lasting and iconic images and points of pride for this city. The full 1% would provide interior and exterior artwork at the city center, outdoor 2-dimensional streetscape project for emerging artists, interior and exterior artwork at the Park and Ride, a temporary Art in the Park sculpture program, as well as the completion of the Cotton Lake Bridge artwork. At $192,000, we'd focus our efforts solely on the city center, and we would reduce the park and ride artwork to signage only. In 2007, the mayor of Providence testified on behalf of the U.S. Conference of Mayors before a House Appropriations Subcommittee on the Interior. He stated that each year for the past 12 years, the U.S. Conference of Mayors has supported policy resolutions on the arts. And he further stated that public funding of the arts helps us build our communities, design our cities, and spur our economies, and it contributes enormously to quality of life. And just as a reminder, over 100 Goodyear citizens and neighbors and arts leaders took time out of their day to write you personal and meaningful messages about their support of the program. And so, again, I urge you to support it, and thank you again.
Thank you for your very cooperative attitude, Brenda, by the way, on this. I know it's not what you want to do. Brenda, by the way, for the public, is our leader of our Arts Commission in Goodyear. Okay, Joan Shields.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's I've listened to your proposal and what you've gone over, and I have a question. While a lot of information was fed to Council and to the Mayor before at the other meetings, I don't see any consideration given to any input from the public, from citizens of Goodyear. And I have wondered if anything along that line is going to happen. Two is, while I appreciate the fact that you want to maintain a high quality of city personnel, and I think we need to do that, but to say that city personnel cannot be reduced more, I beg to differ with. Because right now you are at the highest hiring opportunity to hire great people that would be happy to make $100,000+ for their income. As a lot of people have had to lose their MBA and leadership roles at other companies, they are looking for great jobs, and the city would be a great place to work. And having employees share in their benefit cost might be an opportunity too. I haven't seen anything that has been suggested, and I would like to hear something back from Council as to where you are when we, the public, come and give an input of what we think can be done to help make our city better. What do you do with that? Where does that go? Does it make an input? Do we have a say? I don't think taxes need to be raised. I think the moratoriums need to be made on certain things, like artwork and so forth. Not do away with it, but just moratorium, and building new fire stations and things like this. I think pay needs to be reduced on administration in the city, employees, for the fire department, for the police department, job sharing, all kinds of things that can be done to make a difference. Cross-training so people are more effective. And my time is up, but services will not have to be cut.
You still have a little bit of time.
Oh, do I?
Go to Brad.
Okay. Services do not have to be cut, because I do not believe in cutting anybody, that a policeman out on the beat, firemen in the stations, this type of thing. Cuts need to be made at the top and at the administrative level. So that's all I have to say. I would just like to have input back from you.
Okay, thank you very much. Would anyone else like to comment from the public? Okay, seeing none. Almost. Eli, you? Okay.
Look out. He writes the story. He doesn't want to become it.
Okay, we've got about 15 minutes here, but we can make a lot of progress, I think. If we can just stick to specific comments rather than a lot of philosophy, we can get through this maybe. Let's look at that chart. Approve other sources and fees. Are there any questions on that? Is there any objection to that? I have a question.
If there's any objection last meeting?
I'm just confirming it.
No, yeah. No.
I just, I hadn't thought of it like this, but the two-tier tax rate, which I believe we should eliminate it, for a car dealer in Goodyear, it's going to go from 1.2 to 2.5. So that's a 1.3% increase. That's a pretty significant increase in taxes. And do you feel that way? Should it be drawn out over a couple of years, the increase? Incrementally? Something?
Well, I don't know if incrementally, if we do this across the board, I would like to see us revisit this the same we would revisit the others in 2012, 14, and 16, based on the economic conditions, because this definitely was an incentive-based tax. I mean, this was definitely an economic development tool, albeit small. This was specific to the Pioneer deal. I remember that was one of the very first ones I dealt with when I was on council, and you dealt with as mayor.
Well, I would think,
it is a big jump.
I would think Yates would be very concerned about this in a difficult time to sell cars.
I think Yates has a lot more concern at the present time.
Sorry, what did you say?
I think Yates has a little more concern about being
Being
able to do
just to
business.
stay in business, yeah.
Well, now, wasn't there has been one incremental change already, because it used to be 2,500, and then it went to 5,000. So were you thinking when you said, do you want to do another incremental amount, be 10,000, or were you thinking, how were you thinking?
I was thinking rate. In other words, for example, and I think it's an idea is all, go to keep the two-tier, go to 2% right now, if we're going to 2.5, which I still will object to. But if we were 2 and then 2.1, 2.2, over a 5-year basis or something, I believe we need to do something. It's just a little draconian, this increase, for a market which is in dire straits right now, and that's the automotive market. But we can ask the staff to think about it, and they can talk to Yates and the others and see what they think. Is that all right?
Yeah, I think it's also important to understand the impact of it. So if you're going to come back to us with information, a lot of folks, when they hear 2.5, think, oh, so I go buy a $25,000 car and it's 2.5% all the way across the board. And that's true if you're buying a $25,000 car and you're not trading something in. So I'd like to hear, if you're trading something in and getting $15,000 in value, you're only paying taxes on that 10. We've all been through that scenario, but it's often a misunderstood scenario. So, but I think it is important.
2 weeks to research this.
Yeah, we got a week off.
Okay, is there any,
I wouldn't have.
are we, it sounded like we were had a concurrence generally with that.
I had one question. Last week, you showed a $1.1 million more decreases, more cuts. Is that part of this? Okay, thank you. Okay.
I guess if you're going to come back to us with this 2-tiered thing, I'd like to hear the incremental approach, but I'd also like to hear the tiers. Perhaps we go to 10,000. Perhaps we go to 15,000. Rather than, at 5, we have 1.2, maybe we raise it up to 10. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'd like to just see different approaches.
So you're just trying to make it more palatable for the auto industry in general, here in town? Because I think we had discussed doing away with it, and I guess I thought that was the...
Only option, yeah.
Yeah, that was the
Not the
last
only
time it
option.
came up.
Okay, now, Mrs. Shield, again, she asked for comments on her comments. So I think we're to the point where we do find differing views on this council. And that's on the, we're talking about tax rate increase of 2.25 or 0.5 or not at all. We've talked about pay cuts and we talked about the COPS funding. Can we use that? And apparently we can, although we aren't sure we're going to get that stimulus funding. And to what extent do we want to dip into the rainy day? So if we
Question,
could,
Mayor.
okay, Frank, you want to start? Is that it?
Well, I have a question on the COPS program for the city manager. Is that figured in here? on this recommendation page? The COPS program for, so
No,
that
the
would be an
council has already
additional.
approved that we apply for the COPS program, so that's in effect an already done deal. You could reverse it once we receive the grant if you wanted to.
Saying.
So that we could be using some of that money for some of our present police that are on the street
You will
now.
have to identify which individuals you will lay off and announce which they will be, and then if we apply for it and they approve an extension of that to put it towards existing personnel, then you can do that.
Got to look into that. That's something I think that ought to be looked into.
Okay,
What would you want him to do? Because he's kind of, he would
Well-
have to say, these people are going to, from the safety area, are going to have to be riffed first.
Well, I know, but we can rip them one day and put them back on the next, can't we?
that's what we're doing. That's what this would do.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, so we wouldn't lose any police. We wouldn't lose any of our present police, would we?
No, but what we lose is the proposal that we need one more crime unit,
Street crimes, yeah.
right?
We would lose one street.
So we're going to lose that street crime unit, which, with the increasing crime and the different types of crime the city is now experiencing, which we have not experienced before, you're putting that at risk. And if
What kind of crime
the
is that?
Australia area, those people, Frank, have made it known to the police department that they feel they don't have the protection they want to have, and they feel that an additional street crime unit would be beneficial to the city.
As the council may recall, we've been reporting to you for quite a few months now about the ComStat and the effect it's having. I recall that there was Beat 4, which is Estrella. We were at a 13.5-minute response time to that, which is unacceptable. We have been able to bring that down to the 4-point-some minutes. And that's because of the street crime unit that we have been able to implement. We've been able to keep the people up in Estrella where they belong, rather than having them to come down and help the people down in this part of Goodyear. And so it is something, in my estimation, we're still growing at 1.6% a year, and it's, in my estimation, something that is extremely critical that we have another street crime unit. That's what the council approved, I think it was 2-3 weeks ago.
Right.
And so that's why we're trying to implement that now.
You also had a sheet in the packet today about some stats that are taken on the crimes that have been committed. So it's kind of like,
Yeah, what are we talking about? What kind of crimes?
Can I talk about
8,800
it?
calls for service in the month of April.
Well, I mean, what is that
But the
called?
crime rate was
Healing
down.
of the-
Well,
Crime rate's down.
The type of crime, well, the type of crime rate, I think it was type 1 crimes were down.
Well,
There's 8,800 calls for service still.
I referred to the crime that happened just a week ago where two individuals went into
I think it was TJ Maxx.
TJ Maxx, stole 2 purses. Somebody confronted him. I'm assuming he was an employee. They pulled out box cutters and threatened to slice their throat. Took off with the purses. Now, that kind of crime is just a little bit different than what we're used to having in Goodyear, and that concerns me. And so I just feel like we need that additional crime unit.
I think what we were referring to, Frank, is probably about 4 pages in. It was just a kind of a little synopsis that you had put together about the kinds of crimes that had been reported and what months they'd been reported. So you might look at that and see if that helps you.
Okay, how about on the taxes and rainy day fund comments?
Well, Mr. Mayor, the rainy day fund is designed to assist the council in balancing a budget at times of dire needs. And a rainy day fund in this day and age has become a thunderstorm. So I see no reason why we shouldn't tap into the rainy day fund to assist us over this hurdle. Granted, over the next 3-4 years, we may have a problem in replenishing that, but I think the city manager has pretty much set out a schedule that we can tap into. And with things as they appear today, where the housing market seems to be picking up, maybe that's the ground floor of the recession coming to a close, I hope, anyway. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
No, thank you. I think people agree with you on that one here. I guess what we're looking at, if we would do the rainy day fund for $4 million, if we would pull $4 million out of the rainy day,
3.1 is
but if we did 4 and took us to 16, we still need, what, 4 million or 3 million to be raised through some other form?
less than 3.
I thought it was,
I think the
I thought it's
question
about,
So if we took 4 million, it's 900,000 over and above what I'm recommending.
Still
It would
need-
still be 3.1 or something like that.
I think that's, yeah, it's complicated.
So total still is really 4 million.
It's about that we would have to bring to the table. Okay. So what are the options in doing that?
Exactly. Want to hear options? Is that?
Now, I want to hear what you are willing to support in the 2 weeks.
Well, I was willing, when we first started talking about the first recommendation that came out about, gosh, how long we've been doing this now, 3 or 4 weeks? Seems like a long time. But you had made the recommendation that we pull 4 million. And I agreed with that, because you also showed us where we might run into a problem. You showed us what's going to happen if the mall doesn't come in and kind of where we would stand. But I'm certainly in agreement with Councilman Sousa that it seems like that's what that fund is there for, and we're in a pinch, and we should use it now. And we're optimistic about the future. I believe we can make that up. So if you wanted to, you pulled out so much now, I tell you, I can't remember what all the things are off the top of my head that we could possibly think about putting back in, but certainly would go to 4 million if you felt that it was necessary. Since you recommended 3.1, and you seem to have been able to explain all the other dollars that we're pulling out, then 3.1 sounds good to me, too. I think we have to touch it. It's time.
Mayor, excuse me. I think that, thank you, Mrs. Holland. I think that the staff deserves an awful lot of credit because, as Councilmember Holland stated, we have pulled out an awful lot from this budget. The staff has worked and worked and worked to get this down. There is practically nothing left in their budgets of a discretionary nature. I get worried that if we do end up running into a problem, we will have trouble covering it. I don't think we're there, but it is just a worry that we have. So I think I'd just like to acknowledge the staff and thank them for everything that they have done to bring this to this point. It's obviously been a huge team effort.
Sheree?
I concur.
Well, no, are we all pretty much in agreement that the rainy day fund should be used of at least 3.1 million? Does everyone agree about that?
I think that's true.
Okay, so truly the question where we all seem to have different thoughts is the revenue, how we're going to come up with the 4 million, whether it's either sales tax increase or it's cutting so many things to get to the $4 million mark. That's the true question. That's what we have to deal with and get our hands around.
I agree.
Okay, so that's where we need to get going. Who wants to start that discussion?
Well, I can just tell you, I'm not in favor of slash and burn style of budgeting. I just don't believe in it. And I think that you proposed tonight that in 2010, if we find we're still not increasing the amount of revenue that we need to, then we'll have no other alternative to cut salaries and cut more people. We'll have to. I just don't think at this point we have to do that. I think with the reserve funds, we're able to make the budget work at this time.
Can we move on, though, quickly, because we got to get through this? I think we can get specifics. Do you have any more specifics?
Well, I wouldn't dare to say that. Go ahead, move on.
Okay. Dick, what do you have in specifics? You want the 2.5 or 5.5?
You mean 0.5? Don't say
0.5.
5.
0.5, I said 5.
Okay, 0.5.
Or do you want to cut wages or?
No.
Okay.
No.
I'll jump in if he's going to pause, because you're bent on time. But
Well, he wants to talk.
I'll go along with what the city manager has recommended down, ever since we started into this budget process. As he pointed out, the staff has knuckled down, and I think they've cut as much as they can cut without hurting the city. And that's my concern, is that if we don't get the tax increase, then we're back to square one. And looking to cut salaries, looking to cut personnel, and to me, that would be harmful to the city and to the staff that we've been able to build over the years, and that have enabled us to obtain the name that we have, not only the state of Arizona, but nationwide. So, thank you, Mr.
You're
Mayor.
supporting the recommendation of CM.
That's right.
Okay. Vice Mayor?
Can I ask a question? Since it's 6 o'clock and we're supposed to be moving on, is it possible to recess and come back afterwards?
I was hoping that no one would say that and we could just keep moving on.
Well, I don't
The
know
6
how we
o'clock
were
meeting's
stuck with.
posted
That's
for
why I'm
6
asking
o'clock?
the
There is
question.
a public hearing at 6
public
o'clock.
hearing.
At 6 o'clock.
Pardon me?
It's posted for 6 with a public hearing.
Can we proceed with this if we get this over in 5 or 10 minutes?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I don't know that I have anything new to add to the debate from last week. I mean, yeah, I don't think I need to add anything. You want to race this along. As long as you're not going to, bust out all your salary surveys at the end and open up another big debate, I'll rest on my laurels from last week. I don't mean that as being facetious, but
Well, it was.
it's all fair. It's all fair, because if it comes back around, I mean, we always do this. We come back
Vice Mayor,
around.
it's not going to come back.
Okay. Then I'll rest, and I'll write Joan a letter and communicate to you an email, and because it's not on the record, it's because of time.
Okay. Councilmember Cavalier?
Well, thanks, Mayor, but I'm still having some problems with some of this, and you can't cut salaries. You have to cut people. You can't do that to people. You can't cut their salaries. You can't do furloughs. Furloughs are not the way either. Either salaries cut or furloughs they're morale killers, and you'll kill the whole thing at the city. But you do have to. The only other thing you can do is cut people. Then that's different. But you can't just cut people without cutting the positions. So I guess my question is, I have not heard that some of these positions could still be cut. And if the position can still be cut, then you would have no problem with cutting people. And I hate to talk like this, but I don't see where we're going to save this, and I still think that is an economic. I think it does hurt the economy. It hurts people coming in here, companies coming in here, businesses coming in here to see that Goodyear has such a high tax. They may choose to go somewhere else, and it's, as I told you before, it's difficult for me because so many of our executives that work out here live in another city. Why don't they live here? Well, the reason they don't live here is because there's nothing for them to do here.
The site operator at
And
Lockheed
it's,
Martin, who you cited last week, lives in Canyon Trails. Just a thought.
Frank, we got them all moved.
So anyway, this is just my thought, and I'm still not happy with it, but I guess we'll go from here.
Okay. Councilmember Holland?
Well, I kind of stated a few minutes ago, I
All
stand
right.
behind the city manager's recommendation.
Thank you. Councilmember Osborne?
Well, it's unfortunate that we've run out of time because I did have many things to discuss. And
Well, no, let's, want to recess and get to it? That's fine.
well, I think that our public deserves to hear more. Unfortunately, I hate for them to have to sit through another meeting. I don't know how long it's going to be.
Can you go through your stuff relatively quickly without eliminating it?
Well, no, because, one of the issues here is that we've heard opposition to management's different scenarios, and I want to hear a plan from that opposition as to where we get to $4 million. Okay, Frank just said he wants to cut some other positions, fine, but I don't think you're going to get to $4 million by cutting a few more positions. We have a listing of things that actually could be $2.5 million, but they're extremely ugly, and they're not something I can say I would support. But they're things like completely removing art, completely removing In Focus, shutting down Loma Linda, having upper management take decreases at 1% is $223,000. Furlough days of employees that are 50,000 below or 23,000 per furlough day. The street crime units. That's $776,000. But just as Ms. Lord indicated, we are not in a position to not have another street crimes unit. Well, we have a deputy city manager that will be moving on to absorb his pay. Do we not hire another one? Do we have our employees take health care percentages increased? That could be another $57,000. Can we get rid of Gain and Halloween? Do we get rid of 4th of July? Do we get rid of Holly Jolly and the Symphony? Those are all very ugly ideas that our citizens would have to deal with, but that's another $177,000. Do we want to go down this type of scenario? I don't believe so.
No. No, we don't. I don't.
No, we don't. But the whole point is, if we cut salaries, and I will tell you, there are different management philosophies out there. One is you cut upper management's pay, and as a business owner, I would tell you right now, yes, in hard times, I'm the last person to get paid. But to my employees, I'm not going to cut their pay. I'm going to say, I'm sorry, guys, you got to take Friday off without pay. And that's all there is to it. They would much rather come back to work Monday knowing that their pay rate is at the same scale, but yeah, they had to take a day off without pay. There's different philosophies out there. So until I hear how we're getting to $4 million without raising taxes, which none of us want to do, I don't see what other option we have, unless it's the ugly option, which I call option F, if you get my drift. Okay, so here we're stuck, and it's nothing that any of us are happy with. There is no winner. We all know that. There's no winner. And what I feel is one thing, what the mayor feels one thing. We have to just deal with it, and I believe that we are all elected to make the best decisions that may not be felt at the present, but will be felt in the future. We've gone into debt for that, and we're going to have to move on with it. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
All the points that you brought out are established in the city manager's and administration's proposal, budget. So what are we arguing about? What are we discussing about?
Well, now you're going to hear another side. Okay.
Well, we know.
Very nicely, very kindly stated, though.
Could I just finish, because I got cut off and the rest of them got to say what they wanted to say. So since I
You
saw
never get
how
cut
long
off.
each one of them spoke, I feel like I have the right to have at least a couple more sentences put in. And my concern is that many of us live in communities that furnish us with all the amenities. We have pools and tennis courts and golf courses, and we live a high and mighty life. But there are a number of communities in our neighborhoods that do not have these facilities. And so when we decide we're just going to cut here and slash here and take this person's appointment away so they can't run this particular type of program, we give nothing to the majority of our citizens. And we owe that to them. So it concerns me that we are so easily talking about doing away with services. And when you talk about cutting more money, you're talking about cutting services. And we just are so naive when we keep saying this is not going to affect city services. It is. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, then let me just finish this up and tell you what I would suggest we do. I do not support a tax increase for retail sales tax. And I would support an across-the-board pay cut, approximately $1 million. I've suggested how that could be done before, but I just think it should be weighted more to the higher pay folks, but I'm open on that. I'd like to use the stimulus grant for cops, not to acquire a new street crime unit, but in fact to pay for the one we currently have, and that would be about $750,000. I am against releasing people. I don't think we need to put more people on unemployment out there, and we need that to be more of a serious study like you did the first time. And then the 1.1 million or 0.9 million, I think it changed, that we saved the other day, that you took out of, that you used to reduce the negative impact on rainy day. I would like to see the rainy day cough up $4 million, and that $1 million go to this cause of paying for our expenditures. That gives us $3 million. We need $1 more million. And I would suggest that we just charge the city manager that come back to us with 3 options on how we can save $1 million. And then we can decide as a group, we agree with that option or one of those options, or we don't, and therefore you'd have to raise taxes. But I do think we need to try one more time not to raise taxes. And so that's the way, that's sort of answers your question, I think. So, but looking at this, John, I do think that the majority supports your plan the way it is. I didn't say about Frank's comments on economic development. I support. I just don't want to repeat those. I support the same thought process. So, we move forward to the 4th of June. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, certainly, yes.
Okay. And this meeting's adjourned, and we'll go to our council meeting.